I don't have much time to read every word carefully, because detail is not a vanity I can afford right now. My name is Seth Anderson, and I am a 43-year-old accountant from Washington. I am married and have 2 daughters, and I was mortally afraid of clowns for a time in my life. And that time lasting from my 10th birthday party up until last night. Before I delve into why I am typing this at 3 in the morning, I need you to ask yourself if you fear the dark. If your answer is no, you need to carefully reconsider your answer. For that was my first answer a mere couple of hours ago. For now, there is nothing I fear more. At this point, I would live with clowns just to forget what happened. I know that sounds funny coming from a near middle-aged man on the internet, but hopefully you'll take my words into consideration if you remotely care about your mental health, let alone your life. There is a reason we were born into fearing the dark, but it's far from the scientific explanations that have been built up over the years. There really isn't a right word for what it is, but the best I can say is, it's just wrong. It's not the dark itself, it's what festers in it. What is unearthed when the sun hides beneath the horizon. It's everything wrong with the world, both physically and morally. When it happens, it's almost as if time has shattered. Trying to understand or make sense of this phenomenon is truly impossible. I remember everything so vividly. To recall the event is almost like having a nightmare. It all started a few hours after I returned home from work. I live in the Woodland area, and it is quite a drive back from where I work. I was raised in the woods, and most of my childhood consisted of walking trails and climbing trees, so it only felt right to settle down away from the city lights to let my kids experience the wonders of the outdoors. To clear my mind of documents and papers, I walk the rugged trails within the forest behind my house, which allows me to relive some familiar feelings from when I was a kid. Overtime booked me an extra few hours, so by the time I arrived home, the kids and wife were already in bed. Without thinking, I grabbed my walking stick and water bottle and flew out the glass sliding door. Almost forgetting to close the doors, I quietly slid them shut and trudged through the unkept yard and found myself at the edge of the forest. I gazed into the piney wonderland, but my eyes were met with a wall of darkness. This was very strange because the forecast was a full moon, which should have given ample light to walk the paths. The moonlight almost non-existent, as if the land was absorbing it. I pulled my phone and read the clock. It was 30 minutes past midnight. After turning on my phone flash, I began my walk into the abyss. Around a quarter of a mile in, I looked up from the path and realized I couldn't see more than a few feet in front of me. It was like looking into a tub of oil, the trees drowning in the dark until you pulled them to the surface. And even stranger was the fact I couldn't hear anything. The only sounds that accompanied me were the sounds of my own footsteps and breathing. I mean, this was very unnerving. Even during the winter, you could hear the sounds of trees rustling in the wind. But it was dead silent. No rustling of trees, no insects, just silence. Pushing the strange ordeal out of my head, I walked faster and returned my gaze onto the ground. When I stopped, rather than a worn dirt path, I was standing in the undergrowth of the trees. Something wasn't right, and every feeling in my body was screaming it. I turned around and walked for what seemed like an hour looking for the path, but the dark was so oppressive that it felt like I wasn't moving at all. Then, out of nowhere, my phone shut off. The thing still had over 80% of charge left, yet it had completely shut down. There wasn't a power down sequence or charge alert, just straight to black screen. All I could feel was an overwhelming sense of dread and terror. It felt like thousands of little blades were hovering over every inch of my skin. Moving felt wrong, breathing felt wrong, just being felt wrong. I frantically pressed the power button on my phone, but to no avail. For some unknown reason, the sense of an impending doom was creeping on me. The sensation grew with every second that passed, and my mind was screaming at me to get out of there. My body shot into overdrive as I began sprinting further into the void. As I stumbled through the forest, my eyes slowly adjusted to the dark. I could see faint outlines of the trees and brushes. I ran for what felt like an hour, hoping to break into the clearing or just find a source of light. That's when my phone started ringing. I stopped dead in my tracks, quickly grabbed my phone and raised it to my face. All I could feel was horror. The contact read off as Mom. I didn't know what to do and what to think. I couldn't tell if I was more horrified because I was lost in the void of a forest that I know better than the back of my own hand, or the fact that I was supposedly being called by the woman who died giving birth to me. I mean, I couldn't even make a call because I didn't have any service, let alone receive one. The caller didn't even have a number. It was just blank where the number would be. I had so many thoughts racing through my head. I never had a contact in my phone that goes by Mom, and my phone was dead only a few minutes ago. Reluctantly, I pressed the answer button and raised the phone to my ear. Nothing. I heard absolutely nothing. I tried speaking, but the only sound that came from the other side was static. As I was about to hang up, the caller hung up. With bigger problems than the malfunctioning phone, I took advantage of the flash of the phone once again. I had 30% left, enough for me to find my way home. Before I even turned on the flash switch, the number called again. Dumbfounded, I answered once again and listened. Just as before, I heard nothing. I tried speaking once again, but there was only static. The caller hung up. I brushed it off, turned on the flash, and began jogging in the direction I thought would take me back home. At this point, I wanted nothing more than to get home. About half an hour later, it happened again. My phone buzzed, alarming me I had an incoming call. This time, I answered and angrily shouted at the caller, asking whoever it was why they were calling me. Then I heard something. It was faint, but it was definitely there. His words were inaudible, but they sounded very familiar. I replied asking him to speak louder, but the words were still inaudible. The caller didn't hang up this time, so I pressed end call. As soon as I did, the contact called again. This time I screamed, cursed into the phone, threatening him with whatever was on the top of my head. He spoke again. His voice was much louder, but heavy static preventing me from putting any words together. I angrily hung up and switched over to the flashlight. Not even a minute later, the number called again. With frustration, I let out a blood-curdling scream and moved my finger toward the end call button, not wanting to put up with the nonsense any further. But before I could end the call, the man screamed back louder than ever. Though through heavy static, it almost sounded exactly like me. I shakily ended the call and switched back to the Flash app. That's when I heard the screaming. It didn't stop when I ended the call. I could hear it a distance away from me, growing louder by the second. It wouldn't stop. The static filter was thick. My heart was racing, and I felt the urge to run. My legs felt like concrete, but I managed to get into a running pace up the hill. The screaming was getting closer and closer. No matter how fast I ran, it was only 10 yards behind me and getting closer. It was deafening. My ears felt like they were going to burst at any second. I couldn't hear my own breath at this point. It was getting closer. It sounded like it was only a few feet away from me. Then out of nowhere, it stopped. Screaming or not, I wasn't slowing down. I ran until it felt like my heart was going to explode and my legs were numb. Then I ran even more. The further I ran, the easier it was to see. After about 20 minutes, I could make out trees. I shut off my flash to save power and looked over my shoulder to see if whatever was screaming was chasing me. There didn't seem to be anything, so I slowed my pace to walk. I walked for hours and hours. I walked so long that it should have been sunrise. The clock on my phone was stuck on midnight, and I had no way of telling what time it was, or how long I had been in the forest. After walking for what seemed like an eternity, I broke into a clearing. Relieved, I checked my surroundings for any landmarks, but I was clueless to where I was. Then I saw something in the middle of the clearing. It looked like a giant hole, circular in shape, with a diameter of about 150 feet. I crept towards it to get a better look, and couldn't believe my own eyes. It was like a stone tower, built into the ground. The walls seemed to have been made of cobblestone material, and there were wooden planks sticking out of the walls that wrapped around the entire tower like a spiral staircase. I could see roughly 10 meters down. Then it was just black, as if the dark was a liquid sitting in a glass. I have been walking these woods for a decade and have never seen this thing before. I was left completely shocked. To my utter dismay, my phone rang again. Rather than a call, it was a text message from the same caller from earlier. "Do you see me?" I immediately scanned the area around me. I watched the tree line for movement, but nothing. After assuring that nothing was around me, I leaned over the edge of the hole and looked back into the inverted tower for further inspection. What I saw will haunt me until the day I die. Down on the wall directly below me, I saw a hand reaching out from the blackness. Beside it was a face. My face. I don't think I have ever screamed that loud in my life. The thing mimicking me had an ear-to-ear grin plastered on its face, but the most disturbing part were in his eyeless sockets. Just before I could up and run, it started to twitch rapidly, opening its mouth to release a god-awful static screaming and haunting me hours before. It started to crawl up the wall, its limbs making movements only possible if every bone in your body were broken. There isn't much I remember after that. I recall running the hell out of that place and back into the trees. After that, it was a blur of trees and screaming. The last thing I see before blacking out is the back porch light of my house, illuminating my screaming wife and 2 girls. My wife called an ambulance, but I woke from my unconsciousness before they even arrived. I declined their service and lied to my wife, saying I was just a little lost and passed out from a panic attack. I asked her what time it was, and she replied saying it was only 1 in the morning. My body collapsed when I realized that I was only in the forest for 30 minutes. Shaking it off, I told her I'll go to bed soon. She was reluctant to go to sleep, but eventually did. That was 2 hours ago. About 20 minutes after they went to bed, I heard it again. The screaming returned, and it won't go away. I'm looking out my window now, and I can see it. It's standing out there by the edge of the trees. It hasn't moved. It's been standing there for hours. Every call I made to the police had failed. The lines had been cut, and service just won't go through. I've tried to wake my family, but the staircase that goes up to my rooms is gone. It's like I never even had a staircase at all. There's just a hallway opening 10 feet up on the wall. No matter how much noise I make, they won't reply. All I hear is soft wailing echoing from their rooms. I've tried leaving, but every door is locked. I know that sounds stupid because I'm inside the house. I could just turn the doorknob switch and walk out. Except there isn't a switch. Well, not on my side of the door, that is. The deadbolt switch is on the other side, opposite of mine, effectively locking me inside of my own house and giving anyone, or anything, the ability to come inside. I would crawl out of the window, but the security bars I don't recall installing prevent me from doing so. I've been here for hours, yet the clock won't move from 3. The screaming won't stop. I am not sure if it ever will at this point. I am not sure what else I can do besides hope that this email gets to someone out there. Please, don't be brave. Fear the dark. Just stay in the light. I can't follow you there. That thing is still just standing there. Wait, I think it moved.